Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1976. We're going to be taking a look at Al Stewart and he's going to be playing through Year of the Cat. So let's get Al and the guys up on screen, see how they get on.
Bogart movie in a country where they turn back time. You go strolling through the crowd like Peter Lorre contemplating a crime. She comes out of the sun in a silk dress, running like a watercolor in the rain. Don't bother asking for explanation, she'll just tell you that she came in the year of the cat. She doesn't give you time for questions as she locks up your arm in hers. You follow till your sense of which direction completely disappears. By the blue town walls near the market stalls, there's a hidden door she leads you to. These days she says, I feel my life just like a river running through the year of the cat. She looks at you so coolly, her eyes they shine like the moon and the sea. She comes in incense and patchouli. You take her to find what's waiting inside the year of the cat.
I'm just going to jump in here because there's so much to talk about already, and also the fact that on the Old Grey Whistle test we have so many great performances, and this is a prime example of top musicians. I'm just talking about that intro on the piano because it pulls you into the track, and that was originally written by Peter Wood, and in this performance it's John Peter Robinson who's playing it, but it gets you into the groove of the track straight away before the whole band comes in. And throughout the whole band we've got guys that can hold down solos on their own, like here we've got another solo coming up. We're also going to have a sax solo, and this is something that happened on a lot of Al's tracks, is going to elongated solo sections for different instruments, and it's something that set his tracks apart. And it's one of those performances where you've got a lot of instruments going on and you can focus on those independently if you want to throughout the whole performance, but they're all playing their part. You'll notice how when we go from that piano intro into the verse, the piano really does hold back and starts to just play the chords and maybe a sus2, a sus4, just occasional fills rather than being really involved like it is in the intro, and it was just the piano piano. And this is something you'll find with top compositions, is that when you're focusing just on an instrument, it's a lot busier than when other instruments come in, because you want all the instruments to work together and you don't want each instrument to be playing a solo section all at the same time, because it would just be too much information and it would just be a mess. Whereas here you can listen to the tiny elements that come in and out and it's never overplayed. And just turning the attention onto Al, the first thing to say really is that his vocal has such a unique quality to it. It really does stand out from other vocalists around at the same time. But then also the fact that he puts being original above everything else in terms of when he's writing songs, the lyrics that he puts into songs as well, and often referring back to historical figures when he's writing tracks. And having that focus of originality meant that you'd always get something different, and it was always something interesting that you'd find within the tracks that Al was writing. Al started playing in the mid-60s when he was about 19 in London, and he bought his first guitar from the Police guitarist Andy Summers. He then had to trade that in for an acoustic guitar when he managed to secure a weekly slot at Bungie's Coffee House, and that is in Soho in London. And have a look at that venue, the amount of names that have gone through that place, because it was amazing that as a 19-year-old he managed to get a weekly slot there. We've had guys like Phil Collins, David Bowie, Paul Simon, Art Garfunkel, so many top artists, Cat Stevens as well. Just look through the list on Wikipedia if you want to, how important that venue was for so many musicians. And in 1966 he signed to Decca Records, and after that Columbia Records, and throughout the mid to late 60s he released 6 albums, and they weren't massively successful commercially, but he was making a name for himself, just getting out there playing. And in these times where getting out there and playing was the most important thing, word of mouth spread about Al and his sound, and it wasn't until 1969 when he released Love Chronicles that he got a little bit of attention, because that album and the title track was sexual in nature and was the first commercial recording to include the F word on it. It probably helped as well that he had Jimmy Page and Richard Thompson both playing guitar on that album. And in 1970, he and fellow musician Ian A. Anderson took a trip down to a small farm owned by Michael Eavis, and they set up and played for about 1,000 hippies who each paid £1 to get in, and they called that Glastonbury Festival. So that was the first time that had ever happened, and what a great piece of history that is for Al to be involved with, the first ever Glastonbury Festival in 1970. And his 5th album, called Past, Present and Future in 1973, was the first album to get a proper release over in the USA. And there was a track called Nostradamus, which got a lot of radio airplay, but not on the mainstream radio because it lasted almost 10 minutes. The track, it was played mostly on university and college campus radio stations because they didn't have a strict limit on the length of songs, whereas the mainstream radio stations had a limit on 3 or 4 minutes, which is what they wanted, and he didn't get a lot of play there, but it started the ball rolling over in the USA. In 1975 he released his album called Modern Times, which was lighter on the historical storytelling of the previous Past, Present and Future album, but most notably it was the first album to be produced by Alan Parsons. But let's get back into the performance.
While morning comes, you're still with her. On the bus and the tourists are gone. You've thrown away your choice, you've lost your ticket, so you have to stay on. But the drumbeat strains of the night remain in the rhythm of the newborn day. How you know sometime you're bound to lose, but for now you're gonna stay in the year of the cat.
And there we have it. What a fantastic live performance that was. And just what I love about the show, the Old Grey Whistle Test. Just plug in and play, and more often than not, they just had top musicians and top artists on the show. This is a great example of that, and again, listen out for those different elements that I mentioned. The fact that we've got that piano going on the whole time, some really great fills and lines being played, but also the way that the keys also comes in, almost with the bells that just dot in, is such a nice mix we've got here as well. And of course the saxophone by Phil Kenzie, great playing and so expressive with that saxophone. There's just so many elements in there, and considering it's all totally live, that's the really impressive thing. I think a lot of the time nowadays, you just get used to hearing pre-recorded stuff and you don't really get to appreciate top musicality in a live setting. And this is where you look back at these videos and can get a real appreciation of top talent. And just quickly talking about those two guitar solos, firstly from Al, we had a slow melodic solo with some great phrasing in there, but also when he did end on a fretted note, he applied that side-to-side vibrato just to get the notes to sing and to just sit it in that composition and to keep that feel really consistent throughout the solo. And then we go to Isaac Guillory for his solo as well. Again, really nice and melodic, the control that's in there, and also the control at the top of the bends in order to get that vibrato, like with the bend that he does with his little finger. Again, it just sits it in the track because every note is singing. And then when we throw it over to Phil on saxophone, again, he's got that ability. They're all top players here, so they could apply that feel, that vibrato, that expression through the instrument. And it's great because each of those solos had a little step up from Al's first solo to then Isaac's solo and then Phil's final solo on saxophone. It just really does go up step by step so that we have that crescendo. It's obviously going to sound like that ending with the saxophone because it's such an upfront instrument, but then we're going back into the vocal and taking that dynamic down ever so slightly. So it's really well worked together. And the year of this album, the year of the cat, was 1976, which is the year of the performance that we're looking at. And just from the title, you can tell that Al was really focused on originality and also writing albums and tracks that were more like movies, but also about geography and history, and keeping all of those elements in there, which gave his songs such a unique point of view and sound to them as well musically. And it's no surprise that he shared a flat with Paul Simon, and I wonder what they used to talk about probably late into the early hours of the morning. So there was this steady increase in popularity that Al had with his albums in 1975 with Modern Times, and then The Year of the Cat, which got to number 5 in the US album charts, and then a few years after that is when he released Time Passages, and that got to number 10, I think, in the US album charts as well. So a couple of really popular albums in the mid to late 70s. But it's great to have a look back at footage like this to see top performers in action live, and I've mentioned it in other videos. I wish there was another program like this where you could just check out natural talent and musical talent that's not only around now, the new artists on the scene, but also see how the old guys did it. Just show the young guys how to do it with performances like this. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!